Hello, everybody. This is Bill De La Cruz, and I'm the host of the Origination Point podcast. And when I thought about doing this podcast a number of years ago, I can't even remember when, it was really to share insight, have conversations, to provoke listeners to think about how to become more self aware and how to really manifest the things that we all want in our lives versus feeling victims of what's happening. And that's still true, whether you've listened to The Awakened Heart, where we focus on people who are doing things in their community for other people just out of the love of their heart, or you've listened to The Origination Point, where I've interviewed folks about their own story and how they've been treated and just about how we're getting through these really crazy times that we're all experiencing on the planet. And everybody has their ways of going through these times, especially in this time that we call the holiday season, or whatever you call it, based on your own beliefs. It's an interesting time. And I know that when this time of the year comes, I tend to switch over to watching all kinds of holiday movies, Christmas movies. My family all knows this, that when this time of the year comes and they see the DVR, it'll have 6 Christmas movies on it from the Oprah Winfrey Network, from BET, from Lifetime, from Hallmark. I kind of shop around and just find them. They're always asking me, why do you like all these Christmas movies? What is it about them? And I was just thinking about that today as I was watching one. And I think the reason I like these movies is that it's one of the few times of the year that I can turn something on that's not about killing or poisoning or death or judgments or stereotypes or people being marginalized, because the rest of the year, that's what a lot of television looks like. And so to spend a month just watching people, and of course, I know a lot of it's made up. I'm not naive about these movies. And yet, when I get past that, I see people who are just trying to be kinder around this season, and people who make mistakes and say, I'm sorry. Or like the movie I was watching today, where a person has 12 days to figure out life and to be able to figure out how to have relationships with people outside of material objects. And and it's just really interesting to think about how, from a, I don't know what to call it, maybe seasonal perspective or just a pattern of behavior that we've created when we get to this time of the year, going to the end of the year, people think about being kind or being nice. And while I think that's important, I always wonder, well, what about the other 10 months of the year? Where does that go in terms of how we see each other? And so I've thought a lot about that. And ironically, the tone of the movie I was just watching was basically this question, because the person was told you only have 12 days to figure out your life, to figure out how to rectify and restore some of the relationships that this person had, especially with their daughter. And essentially, after the 12th day, it wasn't fixed in a way that would connect him to the people that he loved. And so he made a deal to have one more day, which I find ironic, because I don't know if I can make a deal at the end of my life to do something and get more time. I think I just have the time that I'm granted. And if I waste that time, or if I negatively impact people, especially people that I love, then that's on me. So, anyway, on the final day, after that wish was granted, the basic premise is that, great, you can have that day, and yet after that day, your life's over. So you'll be all done. And it's interesting what you could imagine. The person woke up the next day and was very kind and engaging and empathetic and behaved in a way that the world didn't revolve around them. And again, it makes me think about if we could get back to caring about others more than or as much as we care about ourselves, what would be different for all of us in the planet? Because we're all living in this crazy divided world where we're basically fighting over who's right and who's wrong versus how do we live together. And so it made me think about, gosh, if I knew that this was my last day to live, how would I act? What would I do? And I think it's an interesting question for everyone to think about, because I'm going to presume, and I'll just base my clarity on my own life, is that if I had one day to live, I'd do as many kind things as I could and connect with as many people that I've been neglecting up until this time, which is a number of people that I'm aware of, people that I think about and I never call, people that we had a connection with, and I wonder, gosh, what happened to it? We both just drifted apart. And it's almost like I'm acting as if I don't care, and yet I really do. I really wonder, like, whatever happened to that person? And some of them I can touch base with, and others I'll never be able to. And so I think if we were living our life as if today was our last day, I think we'd all act a little bit differently. And I'm sure some of you would just go out and try to get as much as you could. Some of you would try to go out and be as much as you could. Some of you would do something in the middle. And it's all about our choice. And we have these extremes in everything. And then there's this happy medium that it would be really nice if we could figure out how to find what that happy medium looks like, where I have my needs met and I can still be engaging and connecting with other people. And so, again, it just made me reflect on, what would I do? What would I regret? What would I resent if this was my last day? And I think regrets are things that, when I think about them, I'm sorry that they happened. And I know that the first half of my life, if I'm being really honest, I was a pretty egotistical, unaware, self-caring, arrogant individual. And I know that people who interacted with me during that time frame, in the most cases, probably saw the worst of my behavior. And I don't say they saw the worst of who I am, because I didn't even know who I was at that time. I knew my behavior was terrible and hurtful. And some of those people who knew me that first half of my life, I've been able to say, I'm sorry. And some of them have forgiven me, and some of them have forgotten me. And so when I think about that, all I can really say is, for everyone who interacted with me for about the first 25 to 30 years of my life, I'm sorry, because I know at some point I probably did something that was hurtful to you, or said something that was hurtful to you. And I think the challenge with regrets is you can't go back and fix them. Once they're done, they're done. And today's the only thing we have. So how do we make the most of it? How do I live a life that doesn't have regrets? Well, the way I live a life that doesn't have regrets is that I live in the present and I make the most of everything that's happening to me in this moment. And that's not always easy. It's hard to be present. There's so many distractions. There's so many things that we're thinking about and that we could be doing. Being present means that I'm just totally in this moment. And I think that's the only way to not have resentments or regrets. I know I started with regrets, but resenting is, from my perspective, more of an egotistical behavior, that I resent something because I believe it shows some shortcoming in myself, or it shows something that I haven't attained, rather than being present and realizing that where I am is where I'm supposed to be in my life. And if I'm satisfied with where I am, then I have to continue to not so much preserve it, but I have to continue to grow it and live it and appreciate it, and not always be wondering, what more can I have? I can always wonder, what more can I be? That's been something that I've learned as I've gotten older, is that never stop asking the question, what more can I be? Because I'm just barely starting to step into who I am. And it's been quite a journey. And so remember this, that we can't go back in time to fix things. We can only live in the present. And the present, I know it's a corny cliche, but a present is a gift. And so being present is a gift that we give ourselves. And so how do we live a life where we do not resent our behaviors and relationships? And all I can do is give you my best guess, or I can give you some specific things that have worked for me, and acknowledging that what works for me may not work for you. And so we all have our path to follow. And so I do know one thing in my understanding now of conflict, is that the emotional energy of unresolved conflict never goes away. It stays in our being somewhere, and we hold it, and it's harmful to us, and it can create resentment, and it can create feeling victimized. And so if you have something to clean up with somebody, clean it up. And that could just be by saying, I'm sorry, that was not my intention. I understand how you could feel this way, and I didn't intend to cause harm. Because if you're able to let go of that unresolved emotional energy, it gives you more space, more breathing room, more life. And by cleaning it up with the other person, you give them more space, more breathing room, more life. And so it really benefits both of you. The one thing that I wished I could do is to go back and release all of that unresolved emotional energy that I carried around as a teenager, because that's what really kept me in that angry, mean mindset for so long. And it's not as an excuse for what I did. I'm not blaming anything that happened to me anymore, because that's a victim mentality. And blaming and feeling victimized, it doesn't work. I have to own my outcomes. And growing up, the things that I went through at home, I mean, I own what happened. And yet it was other people's behavior as well that I couldn't control, that I had to trust. And that worked out sometimes, not all the time. And so I guess what I want you to think about is, if today is the only thing that we have, how do we make the most of it? How do we impact the love of families, the love of friends, the love of humanity, even thinking about, what does self-love look like? And so my goal this year is to keep this feeling that I have about being hopeful, about being kinder, about being more appreciative all year. And I'm going to work on it, and I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to let you know when I didn't quite get there. And I would love to talk with some of you. So if you have a story about the content of this conversation that I'm having with you, reach out to us. And I would love to interview you on my podcast, on this podcast. I should say on our podcast, because if you're listening to it, you're a part of it. And so I really appreciate you listening, because if you weren't listening, I would just be talking to myself, and I don't find that very fun. And I would love to hear your stories. So if you have a story that you want to share about being present, about that question, if it was the last day of your life, how would you act? And really what I want to talk about is, how do we create a more connected community? We've been divided long enough, and it's not serving us. It's time to get connected. It's time to stay connected. And so if you don't reach out, at least have a conversation about this. If you don't have it with somebody else, have it in your head and think about what it means to be present, what it means to be kind, what it means to create a more connected planet, because that's what is within our power. I'm very hopeful. I look forward to talking with you. I look forward to connecting in community. And remember, keep growing.